questions. Dan, do we have any public questions? Or
we don't, Leader, no.
Thank you. Item 5. Item 5 is the 2024-25 outturn report. This can be found on pages 7 to 38 of your agenda pack. Councillor Jamil, as Cabinet Member for Finance and Corporate Governance, will you please introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. I certainly will. As you may remember from previous meetings, I reported that we were forecasting a high revenue overspend. In July last year, the revenue overspend was thought to be as high as £11 million. Today, I can report that we finished the year with a £5 million revenue budget overspend. I recognise that this is not the position we would like to be in, but it is a much improved position from July last year. We've had to use our general fund reserve to cover this overspend, which I've got to point out leaves our reserves in a weaker position and below the required level. During 2024-25, reserves have reduced by just under £19 million. But I am assured work is already underway to find ways to boost those reserve levels. This report sets out a very detailed overview of the financial performance, but I would like to just highlight some of the key points from that report. Firstly, only 68% of the savings programme was delivered. This reflects the ambitious nature of the savings and the challenges we faced when delivering such a large programme. As always, as it seems to be the case, not just us and right across the country, demand for services such as children's social care, placements, housing and home-to-school transport has continued to rise, putting more strain on the costs. We are now in deficit with our dedicated schools grant, and this will effectively be held off balance sheet until the 31st of March 2026, while we await the government's long-term plan for this. In the meantime, this deficit is expected to grow, becoming an even greater risk. The capital programme is significantly underspent, partially due to delays in projects, but also as a result of the moratorium that we placed to reduce capital spend. This was because interest rates have sustained at higher rates for longer, driving up costs of borrowing. Towards the end of the year, this was made worse due to delays in the asset disposal programme. Going into future years, the financial situation remains difficult, and our 2025-26 savings programme is equally ambitious. Our reserves remain low, borrowing costs remain high, and we await to see what our funding will look like from 26-27 onwards, following the implementation of funding reforms. Finally, this report recognises that despite this difficult position, staff across the organisation have worked hard to continue delivering services, whilst at the same time bringing down the deficit. You only have to read the progress made around reducing the use of bed and breakfast for homelessness households, the positive feedback we've received from Ofsted, and the positive report from the Care Quality Commission, and the way we have adapted to spending and recruitment controls being in place to see this in action. I would like to take this opportunity to extend my thanks and appreciation to all staff for their hard work and determination, and in what was a very difficult year financially. I ask them to keep up the good work and continue to rise to the challenge that we face. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jamil, and I second your appreciation of the staff, and I'd like to add my thanks at the same time. Members will now move to questions and debate. First of all, do members of the committee have any questions? Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Leader. Question to you, Councillor Jamil. What sort of actions did you use to manage down the overspend from 11 million down to 5 million in a year? Thank you, Councillor Ellis.
I'd like to firstly say it was a team effort. You know, it's not something that was just down to me. The Section 151 officer that we had, the new officer, and all staff who worked tirelessly to bring down the levels of overspend that we had. Now, in addition to that, I know that At the budget meeting, people didn't vote for it, but FSWG continue to work hard to make sure that not only last year we brought down that overspend, but also this year we're going to meet the financial target challenges that we had, and hopefully next year we'll be in a better position. But a lot will also depend on the government spending review and what they give us, you know, and hopefully this year we'll get a 3-year spending review, and then that will give us a chance to plan better. And I think what also helped, as I've said before, is the spending moratorium on the capital funding, capital programme. That helped. So it was a team game. It was a whole host of things. And we're kind of hoping to learn from that so we can pick up what we did right last year, what we did wrong last year, and this year's we hope to improve on it. So hopefully we'll be in a better position this time next year.
Thank you, Councillor Jamil. Do you have a supplementary question, Nick? Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Any other questions? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Leader. Question for, it might be for Councillor Cole. Obviously, we've talked about one of the high increases in overspend, and we talked about the cost of children's social care. Could you just elaborate, bring alive a little bit, Rick, please, as to what is being put in place this forthcoming year to actually look at the costs that we have currently facing us in the children's care?
I was going to say, John will probably be in a better position to answer this question than me.
John, do you want to pick that up for us, please, in your capacity as Executive Director for Children's Services?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you for the question. There have been a number of things that we've put in place to ensure that we have a stronger grip of the placement budget going forward. I would stress to start with, though, that the placement budget is one of the more volatile budgets that's managed within the City Council, because there are a number of measures that are outside of our control. The courts make decisions that we are then financially responsible, and there are circumstances outside of our control that impact the number of children that we are required to provide care for. That said, we are absolutely committed to ensuring that we use the available resources we have, the placement budget and the money that's made available for the care of our children to the best effect. So a good example of some of the things we've been doing this year is we've recently just launched a new, or in the process of just launching a new arrangement for procuring placements, and I'm confident that that will deliver some significant efficiencies and some savings. We're working tirelessly with our commissioning colleagues and providers to ensure that we purchase the very best placements for our children, so we get the very best outcomes for children. But most importantly, I think what we're doing is we're very much investing in our foster carers. Now, our foster carers are the lifeblood of the looked after system. They are the tireless souls who work endlessly for the best outcomes for all our children. And by investing in that, we can ensure that less children go to residential care distance, more children stay local in our local schools, cared for by local people to get the very best outcomes that we're able to achieve. I'm also pleased to be able to say that working very closely with the lead member for children, we are about to bid for the upcoming kinship care pilot that's about to be launched imminently. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Do you have any follow-up questions?
No, thank you for that very comprehensive picture, and good luck with the
It's
kinship.
great. I mean, we're talking about savings and efficiencies, but we never do lose the humanity in what we do, and I do very much appreciate that. Councillor Cole, I believe you have a question.
Oh, thank you. It's just to follow on from Director for Children's Services comments, also regarding children's social care placements. I would be amiss if I didn't mention our house project that is going to be really beneficial to the young people that are part of that, ensuring that they are able to take on their own tenancy. And we're also looking to the dates for when the second cohort is going to be able to start. So not only is it good for the city, it's good for the young people, and that's what I want most.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Any further questions? If not, we will move to debate. I think it's a relatively straightforward report, but if anybody wishes to raise any points? If not, we'll move to the recommendations, if I may. Excuse me. Colleagues, we're recommended to approve the final 2024-25 revenue and capital outturn as set out in the main report and appendices A and B. 2, performance against the prudential indicators as outlined in Appendix C. And 3, performance on payments, debt collection performance and local taxation outlined in Appendix D. Are we content to approve those recommendations? Thank you. Item 6, Corporate Performance Report Year-End 2025. Item 6 is the Corporate Performance Report. This item can be found on pages 39 to 52 of the agenda, and I'm very pleased to introduce this particular item. This document provides the end-of-year corporate performance review for the reporting period 2024-25. Throughout the year, a total of 84 key performance indicators, known as KPIs, were monitored. However, data is currently available for 74 of those KPIs, as some data has yet to be released. Overall, 58%, 43 out of the 74 of the KPIs have shown improvement compared to the baseline figure, and 35% of the KPIs met or exceeded their targets. Significant progress has been made in the areas of economy and inclusive growth and prevention, independence and resilience. However, several challenges remain, with 41%, 30 of the KPIs, not meeting their targets by the end of the year. Areas requiring attention include an increase in fly tipping incidents, a reduction in the percentage of household waste recycled, and an increase in the percentage of children who are overweight or obese. Okay, so now, members, we will move to questions and debate. Is there any questions on this particular report? Makes edifying reading, and I suggest that anybody... Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Mine isn't a question as such, it's more like you were saying, it's a comment about looking at all the different areas, and there's some really good news that's been going on, you know, in all the aspects of children's, adults, antisocial behaviour, all the housing issues. There's just so much good that has actually gone on in the year, so it's actually really a positive achievement, I think, that as a city we've made for the benefit of the residents.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Jones. Well noted. Any other comments or debate? If not, I'll move to the recommendation that we note and comment on the Corporate Performance Report year-end 2025. Are we content to agree that recommendation? Agreed? Thank you. Okay, item 7 is... Where is item 7? I've lost it. Armed Forces Covenant. The next item presents with the Armed Forces Community Covenant. This item can be found on pages 53 to 60 of the agenda. Councillor Alison Jones, Cabinet Member for Housing and Communities, will you be kind enough to present this report?
Thank you, Leader. Yes. The Armed Forces Community Covenant helps to demonstrate the Council's commitment to the Armed Forces, veterans and their families. This refreshed covenant renews the commitment made by the Council in 2013 through a series of pledges that the Council can make to help remove or mitigate barriers to service personnel, reservists, veterans and cadets movement and military families. The Covenant does not seek to provide any priority to armed forces, but ensure that no member of the armed forces community is disadvantaged from accessing the services and support they need to their service. Cabinet is asked to provide a refreshed covenant and commitment to the overarching principles that members of the armed forces community should not face disadvantages arising from their service in the provision of public and commercial services. In some circumstances, special provision may be justified, especially for those who have given the most, such as the injured or bereaved. I would also like to encourage you all to also attend 2 of the events that are taking place this year on the 21st of June for the Armed Forces Family Fun Day and for the ceremonial day on Saturday the 28th of June. So thank you for this, and I'm sure I can count on your support in this revised, updated covenant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Any questions from members on this refreshed, updated strategy, covenant Councillor Jamil.
Thank you, Chair. It's just for my clarification, because it says in the report that Covenant doesn't seek to provide any priority for armed forces, but ensures that no member of the armed forces community is disadvantaged from accessing. Can maybe not yourself, or maybe Ian can give us an advantage of how that would work in on a daily basis if someone does come in. So how would they know that they're going to be treated as if they're armed forces? I mean, do we have a special officer? How does it work? If you could just explain that process.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Jamil. I will start, and then perhaps you want to sort of like interject if I forget anything. We obviously do have staff that will be trained effectively in this, and we also have a toolbox kit set. And so we will be able to direct them and know exactly with the training for staff to do that. And so there won't be that, what do we do, how do we do that? As a council, we also work very closely with other partners of the armed forces and the charities so that we can get the message out there in terms of how do they hear what we have to offer and how do we then hear what they need. So it's that two-way dialogue. And so we achieve that through our internal processes and communications and training, and then it's through our external partners that we're working with to make sure that they're all aware and that, you know, people don't slip through the net. So it's really more about that information giving and then making sure that we can look after them and take them onto the right roads that they need with the different offerings that we can do as a council.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Ian Phillips, in your capacity as Head of Communities, has you missed anything?
Thank you very much. Nothing missed, I would say, but I would just perhaps say that this covenant, what it really seeks to do is to raise the profile of what the armed forces have given to the city and to the country. And the covenant is the way that the council and other partners can look to make sure that services are available and are targeted, and any barriers that might exist are removed. And part of our work is about engaging with community groups, with veteran groups, and with serving armed forces members and their families to make sure people know that services are available, how to access them, and what to do if they have any issues. And of course, we have an armed forces champion that's a strong part in that role.
Thank you, Ian. Do you have a follow-up, Councillor Jamil?
Yeah, I do. So do we have a liaison with the armed forces? So that we're Navy, do we have someone who's an officer who is dedicated, who works with us, or who we can contact if the need arises? How does that work?
Yep, pick that up, please, Ian.
Thank you. Yes, we do, actually. We have a shared officer across Cambridgeshire that works with all of the military forces in the region, the veteran groups, and there's indeed a Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Armed Forces Board, which we attend, where all of these groups can come together, air any issues, raise any concerns, and for district councils and Peterborough and other partners to make sure we respond to those issues.
Thanks, Ian. And not forgetting, of course, our very own Councillor Jason McNally, who's a real enthusiast as a previously serving officer in the Army. Katie Cole.
Thank you, Leader. I was just going to mention about our Armed Forces champion as an ex-serving military personnel himself. He attends lots of the forces veteran groups across the city. He has enacted the Armed Forces Covenant himself in many issues, and having used the Covenant, knows how to use the Covenant. He is very active, ensuring that fellow veterans like himself are fully aware of what they are, the support they're entitled to. So I just wanted to thank him for his work for the last year.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. You'd think, if you didn't know better, you'd think he was a fellow ward councillor, wouldn't you? No, he does a sterling job.
And friend.
Thank you. Any further questions or debate? No, that's wonderful. In which case, Cabinet is recommended to approve the refreshed Armed Forces Community Covenant, noting the series of pledges that the Council can make to the service personnel, reservists, veterans and cadet movement and military families. Are we content to agree the recommendation? Thank you. Okay, item 8. Item 8 presents the revised governance arrangements for the Community Infrastructure Levy and can be found on pages 61 to 76 of the agenda. Councillor Thulborn, Cabinet Member for Growth and Regeneration, will you please take us through this report?
Of course, Leader. In April 2015, the Council adopted a Community Infrastructure Levy, a SIL. The purpose of a SIL is to raise funds from developments to help pay for infrastructure, support the growth of the city. The existing SIL governance arrangements were adopted in 2016. These updated governance arrangements reflect changes to both the SIL regulations and the Council's internal processes for managing spend of the strategic portion of SIL and the neighbourhood portion of SIL for non-parish council areas.
Thank you, Councillor Thorburn. We now move to questions of either clarification and or debate. Any questions on the SIL, the Community Infrastructure Levy? Councillor Jamil and Councillor Cole. Councillor Jamil, please.
Thank you, Leader. It's just SIL is one of those mysterious things that, you know, officers bring up when there's a shortage of something, saying, yeah, here's money. Now, I can see how parishes, how they seek an advantage, but a lot of the city is not parish. How do I ensure that my ward will get its fair share under this new scheme?
I have a feeling that Councillor Cole was going to ask you a similar question. We're in a non-parished wards.
We'll only answer one then, shall we? One of the benefits of the changes that I'm seeing through this process is clear allocation of numbers, percentages to non-parished areas. Another significant part is, for years now, there's been nobody in place to manage that process. So that now falls under the remit of growth and regeneration, and that area can now be much clearer. And you're right, SIL's always been a mystery. Where was it? Have we got any? Can we spend it? What on and how? This change will actually, purely down process, but personnel as well, and the where it's sitting, will enable you to be much clearer about what is available, what funds are there, and what you can do. So in other words, over to you, Jamil. You can manage your own area under the new SIL proposals much easier. So don't sit and wait for it, go after it.
Okay, in a moment I'm going to bring in Michael Freeman, but before we do, so you can kill two birds with one stone, hopefully, Michael, I'll ask Councillor Cole to come in on that.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Jamil stole quite a lot of my thunder, but what I want to ask is what communication is going to be given to the wider public so that community groups in areas where there isn't a parish council know about this fund and know how to access it more importantly.
Hi, yeah, my name's Mike Freeman. I'm the Planning Obligations Officer here at Peterborough City Council. In relation to your final point then, because the function is going to come back into growth and regeneration, because there's not been that capacity in neighbourhoods, there'll be a dedicated officer that will be able to liaise with parish councils, community groups, to be able to identify, in collaboration with the city council, what the priorities are, and part of the local plan that's currently being considered is the creation of an infrastructure delivery plan. And so, you know, there's potential for both of those, the parish councils, the neighbourhood groups, the community groups, to identify projects that are on the IDS, but are also coming forward from their own communities. So it would give more opportunity for community collaboration.
Okay, Councillor Cole, do you have a follow-up question? Yeah.
Thank you, Leader. Just thinking about my own ward, I know of projects that are being spoken about. I'm wanting to ask, is there going to be any kind of proactive comms that may go out there to user groups that state what they've got to do, who they've got to speak to, what forms need to be filled in? Because some of the groups may have a fantastic idea and then they may come back to myself or my fellow ward councillors and say, how do I fill this in? So I think it's important that community groups are empowered to make those decisions for themselves. I was just wondering, is there going to be a strategy to communicate that to the wider public?
almost borders on debate, but we'll take it as a question. Mike, do you want to come back?
Yeah. In terms of, is there a plan to do that specifically? No, but that would be the spirit of the reason that we're doing this, so that the wider that we can cast the net, the more we reflect what the priorities of the community are.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Cahill.
Thank you. Could you give me a clear example of where a SIL would raise fund from these developments? Anything at all that you can present to us that has been a positive example of a SIL raising funds and then obviously contributing to the growth and development of an area or a ward? Any in mind at all?
I don't know who wants to pick. Nick, do you want to pick that up, or Mike?
I'll do the first bit. As far as I'm concerned, SIL is a levy on developments to enable that area to support that development. So just about every development in your ward would have contributed SIL in the last 10 years. And that money would have gone into roads, etc., etc. But I'm sure, as an example, you might have a better example than me.
Mike, do you want
Michael,
do you want to pick it up? Or Mike, are you happy to pick that up,
Yeah,
please?
of course, yeah. So in terms of SIL, and I understand, you know, from the earlier comments about the mysteries surrounding it, but as a real basic introduction, the community infrastructure levy, we can only allocate the funds that we collect on specific infrastructure, which is capital projects. You can have some associated revenue spending. So, for example, if you were putting some barriers in down a highway, then that's a capital project, but there's going to be some revenue cost for maintenance in the future. So, a good example of what SIL's been used for in the past are education projects for extensions to classrooms. The element of SIL that is generally seen to be making those contributions to projects is the strategic element of SIL. So for every £1 we get, 5% has to go to administration costs, 15% goes to the parish council where the development took place. If that parish council has adopted a neighbourhood plan, they get 25%. So the strategic SIL is what's left after the neighbourhood portion and the admin portion. If the development's not in a parished area, as we were talking earlier, the neighbourhood portion's retained by Peterborough City Council, and we're going to liaise with communities to identify what the priorities are. But in terms of what strategic SIL has been spent on over the last 10 years, there's been numerous projects, and the infrastructure funding statement that we have to publish by the 31st of December each year lists all the projects that SIL has funded, as well as Section 106 projects that we've funded. So if you know, after the meeting, you wanted to delve into what we've allocated SIL to on our dedicated SIL 106 web pages, at the bottom, infrastructure funding statements going back to 2019-20. Before that date, they were referred to as Section 62 monitoring reports.
Thank you, Leader. That's been actually an education and part of the demystifying that Councillor Jamil referred to. So that's been really useful. Thank you very much.
Okay, and that's widely available to the public as well if they want to. That's key, obviously, not just for us, but it's worth knowing. Adrian.
So I was frantically finding the document that Mike just referred to try and bring it to life a little bit more. So thanks for buying me a bit of time. So just some further examples of how SIL has been used in 23-24. A whole range of schemes, from Central and Interpark Tennis Court upgrades, so fairly significant, very public kind of investment in frontline services, right through to major highway upgrades, some specific land issues around particular properties where there's been major development, development in the former Gloucester Centre. So some of it's directly supporting our frontline provision and that of our partners. The list goes on, actually. There's a GP expansion project in there, because where we've grown a community, we need more GP capacity, and one of the only ways to do that is to invest SIL. to enable the growth of that surgery, replacement flood lighting, Thorney, all sorts of things. So have a look at that. It's at the right on the council's website, very publicly available, and it does show the breadth, I think, of what can happen with the developer in collaboration.
I'm delighted to have a greater understanding of it now. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks. I just thought the upgrade on the tennis courts, I haven't used them, but it's just because I'm a lousy tennis player, so I'm pleased the Sill's taking care of it. Any other questions? Jamil?
You'll probably hate me for asking this, but how much money do we have sitting in Sill at the moment? I can think of a few projects, that's why.
Gentlemen, who wants to?
I
Who
think
wants that
Mike
hot
will have the
potato?
finger at the number at the tip of his fingers, I'm sure.
Yeah, sure.
Should do, but I...
So in terms of what we have, in terms of the neighbourhood portion of Sill for non-parished areas, that's what part of this recommendation is how we're going to be allocating that. There's £600,000 in that fund. In relation to strategic Sill, the current balance is £900,000. That is split in accordance with the percentage split of Sill, which is we're moving away with these recommendations from the percentage split of Sill to a single pot. But that percentage split will be allocated to those service areas, and from developments that come forward, if this is approved, then the strategic Sill will go to a single pot.
Right, you have a follow-up, Councillor
I
Jamil.
do. What's the difference between Section 106 and Sill?
Okay, so in terms of Sill, we adopted the Community Infrastructure Levy in 2015. The Sill regulations came in 2010, and the idea of Sill was to spread the burden of that increase in land value so that more than the volume house builders paid a fair share of that increase in land value. The Sill regulations, when they were first introduced, it was envisaged that they would replace Section 106, and they haven't. And there was, with the previous central government proposals to introduce an infrastructure levy, so drop the community, and that again proposed that the infrastructure levy would do away with 106. The fact is, because Sill is mandatory, you need some flexibility in terms of identifying priorities and balancing that growth, that question between growth and developers making a meaningful contribution to infrastructure provision. And 106 do that because they're negotiated settlements. So if someone's coming along to Peterborough City Council, we've adopted a Sill, and in our charging schedule, so developments up to 500 dwellings, those developments have to pay, it's mandatory to pay the Sill. But in terms of us delivering our affordable housing, which is 30% of the dwellings on sites of 15 or more, the affordable housing is delivered through a Section 106, as are other on-site provisions that we're able to deliver through 106 in conjunction with Sill. So the answer to your question, what's the difference between Section 106 and Sill, is that they are very different beasts, but they can work quite well together. And I think the different legislation that's come through over the last 15 years when I've been working in this field demonstrates that it's difficult to remove something where you have that element of negotiation in the process, which Sill doesn't have.
Councillor Jamil, you're looking either bemused or completely content. I can't remember.
I am content. I was going to say that I always found Section 106 was a mystery, because I represent Central Ward, which has city centre in it, and the amount of development that we've had, but the amount of money that's gone into the area are completely disproportionate. So I'm kind of hoping that this will now rebalance some of that.
Yep. Thanks, Mike, for that explanation. But To everybody out there, Google it, because it's a very good, it's very put very succinctly, but thanks, Mike, for doing that. Any other questions or debate before we move to the recommendations? Okay. In which case, the Cabinet is asked to recommend that Cabinet reviews the revised community infrastructure levy arrangements so that the strategic portion of SIL income received from the date of approval of the revised government's arrangements be pooled to a single pot to be allocated by the Capital Board to fund projects in accordance with the Council's capital spending priorities. And 2, the process for managing the neighbourhood portion of SIL for non-parished areas is updated to improve access to these funds for community-supported projects. Members, are we content to agree the recommendations? Thank you. Item 9 is a report about the all-age carers contract. The item can be found on pages 77 to 86 of the agenda pack. Councillor Cole. It's not you, is it? It's Shabina. Councillor Kayum, because it's the Shabina show from now on. Cabinet Member for Adults and Health, would you please take us through this?
Thank you, Leader. I'll be delighted to. So this paper actually seeks approval to award Peterborough All-Age Carers Service. It's a statutory service which provides support to carers of all ages, ensuring carers are recognised, valued and supported to maintain their caring role for as long as possible and appropriate. Now, we've come to the end of our current contractual arrangements and have re-procured to continue these services. The service is split across 2 lots. Lot 1 is designed for adults 18 plus, with Making Space being the successful bidder, and Lot 2, which is aimed at young carers under 18s, which will be awarded to Centre 33. I'll add they're an amazing organisation. The contract duration is a maximum of 5 years, 3 + 1 + 1, and has maximum combined value of £1,707,270. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kayum. Any questions from members? Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Quam, what are the aims and objectives to achieve outcomes for these carers, and what long-term goals are there?
Thank you very much, Councillor Ellis. We conducted a carer survey last year, and out of that came our carer strategy, which identified the needs for us to work a little bit more as an authority with our carer population. So what we hope to do from this service, or from this commission service, is to early identification of carers, to identify our carers early rather than late, and make sure that there are no carers that are falling through the gaps and are unidentified, to provide emotional and psychological support for this population, which I think is really important because it's a job in itself, and often there are those carers that are not paid at all for what they do with their loved ones. Awareness with raising and collaborative working with key stakeholders such as health, social care and education to identify this cohort too. To give information, guidance and training to this population, which is important when you're looking after a loved one who has care needs, especially for carers. And specialist support for carers who are caring for people with complex needs, how we know how arduous that can be as well in terms of giving them respite and information on where to gain that. And also a focus on prevention and targeted support for carers who are at risk of domestic abuse. And with everything around safeguarding nowadays that we're seeing in the news, I think that that's really important to highlight here too. Young carers assessments for young carers. So adult carer assessments are conducted by an in-house team already. Contingency planning and support, and also respite care for adult carers as well. So that's something which we hope will be covered under the terms of this contract.
Thank you, Councillor Camp. Councillor Ellis. Yep, you're happy. Okay. Any further questions? Steve Taylor, Executive Director for Adults.
Just very quickly, I guess this was an area that I think when we uncoupled from Cambridgeshire, we'd really identified as a priority area and an area that we weren't particularly performing that well. And we also know that the single biggest driver of demand into adult social care is carer breakdown. So for us, it's kind of morally the really right thing to do to get it for informal carers, but also makes kind of real practical sense. And in a recent National Carers Survey, we came out really highly across a whole kind of range of indicators around carers, so we feel we're making really good progress in this area.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to add that I attended the Carers Forum that Councillor Cahan was part of earlier in the year, and I'm really pleased to see that there's a separate section for young carers who in schools are supported by their teachers and schools, but young carers are often the unsung carers within the family, and I think it's really important that this contract has a specific element towards young carers who will be caring for loved ones the moment they get up in the morning to the moment they go to bed, and trying to balance school life as well. So I'm really pleased that this has a separate element for young carers.
Absolutely. Any other questions or debate? All I'd like to say, this is two excellent third sector organisations that I've worked with and been familiar with for a number of years. So it's very welcome indeed, as I'm sure everybody concurs. If there's no further questions, I'm asking the Cabinet to, 1, authorise the award of a contract to Making Space for a total value of £140,900 over a maximum period of 5 years, estimated annual value of £228,180 per contract year.
Point of information, Leader, if I may. I have on my paper over here that the value that I have, the contract value, so I'd like to refer to the monitoring officer for clarity, is £1,707,270, and I'm wondering if that differs on your paper.
It does differ on mine, so Neil.
No, thank you. The figure in the report is £1,140,900.
Where's your figure from?
My figure is from my introductory paragraph document that I have in front of me.
I think that must be a mistake.
Okay.
Can we just clarify that, yeah? So we can...
So in the way of announcements, it is not the figure of £1,707,270.
Not to my knowledge.
No, that's what I have written here.
The figure I've done is 1,140,900. Sorry.
I think if in the executive summary, you've got a total of both lots, and the recommendation splits them between lot 1 and lot 2. I think that might be the reason for the discrepancy.
I'm just going to revert to the service director.
Oh, hang on, there's two cuts. So I'm just saying 1.1 plus 566. That's probably going to bring you to that figure. With my mental arithmetic isn't that good. I'm not on countdown, but I think that's probably the figure that you're looking at. For the total contract value, I'm reading it as the portion to Making Space and the portion to Centre 33. Is that okay? Does that make sense?
Yes. Can we just repeat your figure as a matter of clarity?
Can I'll tell you what I'll do. Let me read out the two things, and then if you want to just have them together, that should come close to, if not the exact figure. You ready?
Thank you.
Okay, so the award of the contract to Making Space for a total value of £1,140,900 over a maximum of 5 years, estimated annual value of £228,180 per contract year, to provide the Council's Adults Carers Service Lot 1. The initial contract term will be for 3 years, beginning on the 1st of August 2025, with 2 additional 1-year extension options. Number 2, authorise the award of a contract to Centre 33 for a total value of £566,370 over a maximum of 5 years, estimated annual value of £113,274 per contract year, to provide the Council's Young Carers Service Lot 2. The initial contract will be 3 years, beginning on the 1st of August 2025, with 2 additional 1-year extension options. Is that
I
okay?
think that is right. It's the total of the two
It's the
It's
two
the
contracts.
total
together as the
combined
total.
contract. Thank you. No, thank you for
no, that's
clarity.
great.
That was
No,
important.
I get it. Okay.
Thank you.
And 3, authorise the Executive Director, Adult Services, at their discretion to exercise the optional contract extensions and extend the contract for a further 2 periods of 12 months in accordance with the contract provisions. Are we okay? Are we content to agree those recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. All right, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. Item 10. Item 10 is a report about the Day Opportunities pseudo-dynamic purchasing system. This can be found on pages 87 to 90 of the agenda. Councillor Keom, as Cabinet Member for Adult Services, please take us through this report.
Thank you, Leader. Just to rectify an error in the previous Cabinet decision to award the Day Opportunity pseudo-dynamic purchasing system, which has been referenced in the papers, contained an error actually. So the body of the report stated that the contract duration was 3 years with an option to extend for 4 years. But the recommendation at the time erroneously stated that the contract duration was 4 years with an option to extend for 3 years. So this paper actually notes that error and agrees to the 3+4 contract period. And the other elements of the decision remain unaltered. So I just really want to highlight the meticulous governance in recognising that, and also the safeguarding aspects. So obviously if the contract or the people who have been successful in that bid don't meet the requirements in lines with our contractual agreements, it gives us the ability to revisit this in that way. So I just wanted to highlight that.
I couldn't agree more. It shows good governance, the fact that we're taking it seriously and the fact that we're dealing with it in the public domain. Any questions from members or debate seeking clarification? I think it's fairly clear what has happened and what we're doing about it. In which case, I'm asking Cabinet to note the error stipulated within the report at paragraphs 2.4 and 5.1 and decide and January 25 CAB /63 relating to the contract period. The contract period should have said a term of 3 years with an option to extend up to 4 years in increments of 12 months. And 2, agrees to the amended contract period being 3 years with an option to extend up to 4 years in increments of 12 months. The other elements of the decision remain unaltered. Are we content to agree the recommendations? Thank you. Okay. Item 11, Integrated Sexual and Reproductive Health Treatment Services Agenda for Change Uplift. Item 11 is a report about this treatment service. The item can be found on pages 91 to 96 of the agenda pack. Councillor Keom, once again, will you take us through this report, please?
Thank you, Leader. I'd be delighted to. So this paper actually outlines an amendment to the annual value of the Integrated Sexual and Reproductive Health Service in Peterborough, and to take into account the recent NHS pay awards, which we know nationally have been awarded. The service offers testing and treatment of sexually transmitted infections as well as access to contraception. This service is currently provided by Cambridgeshire Community Services NHS Trust as part of a delegation arrangement, because we share the service, with Cambridgeshire County Council, which actually provides efficiencies in the service.
Thank you, Councillor Keom. Any questions from members, please? If there are no questions, any debate before we move to recommendations? Okay, I think it's reasonably straightforward, and Cabinet is asked to approve a variation of the annual value of the delegated function of integrated sexual and reproductive healthcare treatment services, with Peterborough City Council delegates to Cambridge County Council for the period of the 1st of April 2025 to 31st of March 2031. The annual value of the delegation shall increase by £103,324, reflecting mandatory agenda for change and medical and dental uplifts that must be incorporated within the cost of delivering this health-related services for 25-26 onwards. And 2, authorise a deed of variation to the delegation agreement between PCC and CCC that governs delivery of the integrated sexual and reproductive health treatment services across Peterborough and Cambridgeshire for a period of 1st of April 2025 to the 31st of March. The deed of variation shall document the increase to annual values of PCC's delegated function by £103,324 per annum, total increase of £619,944 for the duration of the delegation. Well done, me. Are we content to, if you stayed with me, are we agreed? Which bit did you miss, Councillor? Are we agreed? Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. Item 12. Let this be simpler, please. The report seeking approval toward a contract for care provision to Action for Children. This item can be found on pages 97 to 106 of the agenda. Councillor Keown, once again, I'll call upon you to introduce this report, please.
Thank you, Leader. So Cabinet are requested to approve a 7-year care provision contract to the current provider of care provision, Action for Children, for a bespoke solo placement until 2032 with a ceiling price for the full contract term of £10.9 million. This contract will ensure continuity of care provision for this young person when transitioning into their forever home. The care provision for this bespoke solo placement is a joint funding arrangement between Peterborough City Council and the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Integrated Care Board, or ICB, and the value reflects both the Peterborough and ICB funding contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keown. I'm conscious now we're going to move to questions of clarification debate, but there are, in the appendix, contains exempt information, and if members wish to discuss particular items in that appendix, indicate that clearly, as we will need to move into private session. If that isn't the case, can members have any questions or points of discussion, please? Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Leader. This isn't specifics, so it's not touching on any issues that we shouldn't be speaking about. But I just wanted to ask that moving forward, when similar cases like this come around, how are Peterborough City Council going to ensure that it's recovering contributions from the health service where there's a legal obligation to provide this level of support?
Thank you, Councillor Cole.
Yeah. So,
do you want to pick this up? Yeah,
and I'll hand it over to Steve. First of all, I think it's important to recognise with this as a case example that this has been an ongoing piece of work for 5 years, without going into detail, and how heavily the NHS have invested within this particular case. In terms of recouping those funds, I will turn to Steve, because it is an ongoing piece of work, and no doubt it's an important question, but also reflects the real collaborative work that has taken place with the NHS and our authority, and actually a real example that where an individual or any individual doesn't meet the parameters of being able to be kept safe by the regular provision that we have. We know we've got a high security provision in Care Lodge as well, that we are able to provide that level of safety to one child. And I'm going to hand it over to Steve to complete anything else or add anything else.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think this has been a piece of work, a tripartite piece of work between NHS England, who paid for the house and all kind of adaptations, the ICB and Peterborough City Council. The legislation from it comes from Section 117 of the Mental Health Act, so the agreement around kind of the joint funding arrangement really is enshrined in legislation. So it's been an agreement over a 5-year piece of work. So there's a kind of statutory legal responsibility for the ICB to pay their kind of to pay the amount of money that they're committed to on this. We've also done kind of very well in terms of our negotiations really with the ICB in terms of general continuing healthcare funding and general collection of kind of money owed from the ICB. We've made really good progress with that generally, I think, kind of over the last 18 months. And generally the problems there come where there's debate over the agreement around it and reaching agreement, but this is enshrined in legislation and they have a statutory responsibility to provide 50% here.
Excellent. Thanks, Stephen. Thank you, Councillor Kayham. Councillor Cole, have you any further questions? You're happy with the response? Councillor Jamil.
Thank you, Leader. I know people are going to look at this and think that's an awful lot of money to be spent on one child. Now, just to give us, without going into too much detail where we identify the child or the person in question, as the kind of things that what this money will be spent on. So the public out there have a better idea that we as a council get these type of cases, and it's important they have an understanding of why these costs are being incurred.
It's a reasonable question. Councillor Kayham, we're happy to pick that up.
I'll start and I'll hand over to Steve if there's anything to add. Such cases often involve an awful lot of multidisciplinary input, which obviously has an ensuing cost, and largely around safety, complexity of needs, which are evolving and could change in intensity over the future, and obviously taking into account that the number of specialities that possibly could be involved in organisations and authorities under that premise of safeguarding are also are one of the reasons why that there is such a heavy cost involved in this. I'm going to hand over to Steve to add anything else.
Yeah, I don't really want to go into any more detail at the moment. It's somebody with really, really high levels of care needs, so, you know, someone with autism and learning disability with extremely high levels of care needs and challenging behaviour. And I wouldn't want to go into any more details around that in this forum.
No, very much appreciated. Councillor Jamil, are you okay with that? Okay. Thank you for the responses. Any other further questions or debate before we move to recommendations? No? Okay. In which case, Cabinet is asked to approve the award of a contract to Action for Children, registered under company number 04764-232, to deliver care services commencing on the 24th of June 2025 for a total term of 7 years, initial term of 3 years with an option to extend for 2 years, then a further 1 year, and for another 1 year, effectively 3 + 2 + 1 + 1, for the approximate cost of up to £1,560,000 per annum for care of an individual with complex needs, either in a care home or supported living accommodation. 2, delegate approval to the Executive Director of Adults Health and Commissioning to agree an uplift per annum of the contract value in line with the Council's uplift strategy, and B, to agree to increase or decrease the price to reflect the required level of care. Members, are we content to agree these recommendations? Thank you very much indeed. That is 12 very substantial items with an awful lot of information in there. Thank you to everyone for being here and for everything, for your contributions today. And it just leaves me to thank you for your attendance and input at today's meeting of the Cabinet. There were a lot of items and a lot to take in. It just remains for me to close the meeting and wish you a safe journey home when you go there. Thank you.